Hey guys, it's Allie, and in the example I found for informed consent, the letter started with the nature of the program, so what would be provided in the program and what it consists of, and then it went through and explained the responsibilities of the therapist. So it started with confidentiality and how everything stays between the client and the counselor, and it went through HIPAA regulations, and then it stated the times where there would be legal exceptions to disclose and break that confidentiality in order to protect the client or other people. It then explained the responsibilities of the client. So the client is required to attend their sessions, and if they plan on canceling, they need to cancel 24 hours before. And then if they continue to not show for their sessions without any notice, they will be discharged and required to seek services elsewhere. The letter also gave information about billing and how insurances would be billed, and that the client is responsible for bringing in their insurance info when they start treatment in order for insurance to be billed properly. And then a client is responsible for any fees not covered by the insurance. So in this particular example, it was $150 that they would be required after every session if the insurance did not cover it. The letter also stated that if there were any complaints, the client is able to talk to either their counselor if it's in a private practice or a supervisor figure if it's in another outpatient facility, and that they are encouraged to do so in order to resolve any conflict and continue treatment. The letter explains that a client will be receiving a diagnosis while in treatment and the interventions that they will use in order to treat that diagnosis. The therapist also explains the limits and the risks of their modalities and that the client can refuse, but explains the consequences of that refusal. The therapist also put in the letter about their availability, and if they're going to be away for a while, that they will let the client know that they will not be available for treatment. So then the last part of the informed consent is the client agreeing that they read it and that they agree with every statement provided and signing the consent. So most of this is in regulation with the PA code and the ACA code of ethics, where they state the nature of the program, the costs of the program, alternatives, that there was clear language, the informed consent was easy to understand, and the techniques and limits of the treatment, and the consequences that could come from refusing the treatment, or just the limits in general of the treatment. One thing that was not addressed, according to the ACA Code of Ethics, is continued service if the counselor is not able to continue service. So it did not mention anything about referrals if the counselor is not able to counsel that client anymore. According to an article by Fisher in 2008, there are two parts to the informed consent. Is a client is responsible for giving consent to the counselor. So I know in my line of work in a methadone clinic, my clients have to sign consents at intake, where we can request records from wherever they're receiving treatment, whether it be a primary doctor, mental health provider, any hospitalizations they've had in the last couple of years. The client has to sign consent for us to state that they are in treatment and that we need those records. And then the counselor also needs consent to disclose information under certain circumstances. So the counselor doesn't always get signed consents from the client. If the client is mandated to treatment, they have the option to sign for their PO, which they can only give a limited amount of information to a PO if they are mandated to be in treatment, mostly what their requirements are and what their progress is, but it's very limited information. But if a client is a danger to themselves or others, then a legal system demand would require the counselor to disclose that information, whether there is a signed consent or not. So those are the similarities between the codes and the example that I found, as well as additional information that further clarifies the responsibilities of informed consent and what needs to be incorporated into it in order to best explain the program and provide information to the client.